Imagine this, the next Batman movie comes out and you have only 2 weeks to see it in theaters. Miss that window? And that's it. No second run, and no slow burn word of mouth like what happened on Batman Begins. And no cultural moment like The Dark Knight. The film doesn't fade out, it just vanishes after 2 weeks. Pulled from theaters and locked behind a subscription paywall forever. Now, this isn't a hypothetical, this is the future if Netflix buys Warner Brothers. And if you love movies, this should terrify you. Because Netflix isn't just buying a studio, they're trying to dismantle the movie theater business model entirely. That means Batman, Superman, Harry Potter, and Dune aren't cinema events anymore. They're not experiences, they're just content. And that would be a disaster for the entire industry. So let's dive in and take a look at why Netflix buying Warner Brothers might just kill cinema. First of all, Netflix was never meant to be a movie studio. It wasn't born in Hollywood, it wasn't founded by filmmakers, and it definitely wasn't created to decide the future of cinema. Netflix started as a solution to a very specific early 2000s problem. I don't feel like driving to Blockbuster. That was it. You paid a monthly subscription, they mailed you DVDs, and you avoided late fees. No algorithms, no prestige TV, no billion-dollar franchises, just convenience for people who were too lazy to schlep to the video store. And I say that lovingly, because that was the pitch. And it's a good one. What's wild is that Netflix didn't even really believe in itself at first. At one point, the company literally tried to sell itself to Blockbuster for around $50 million. And Blockbuster laughed them out of the room. Which is funny in a dark, ironic Greek tragedy kind of way, because Blockbuster no longer exists. And Netflix is so large now that it might absorb Warner Brothers like a corporate black hole. That rejection is often framed as one of the biggest business blunders of all time, and in hindsight, yeah, it was brutal. But at the time, streaming wasn't really a thing. Internet speeds were slow, DVDs still ruled, and Netflix was a niche service with a clever logistics model, not a cultural force. Then, broadband happened. As internet speeds got faster, Netflix pivoted, and that pivot changed everything. Streaming turned Netflix from a DVD delivery service into a platform. And once content lives on a platform, the rules are kind of different. Suddenly, you're not just distributing movies, you're competing against studios. At first, Netflix was just a library. Then it started noticing something uncomfortable. Studios could pull their content at any time, and they did, and they still do, which meant Netflix had to do the unthinkable. They had to make their own stuff. That's when Netflix crossed the Rubicon. House of Cards wasn't just a hit, it was a statement. Big name actors, big name directors, like David Fincher, big budgets, released all at once. The first truly bingeable prestige series. Overnight, television changed. The entire idea of scheduled television collapsed. Entire seasons dropped at once, and binge watching became the norm. Netflix, though, didn't just disrupt TV, it rewired it. And then inevitably they turned to movies. Netflix has an ungodly amount of money, hundreds of millions of subscribers worldwide, multiplied by a $10 to $20 monthly fee equals tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue. That's how Netflix ended up financing movies like The Irishman or Killers of the Flower Moon, films with massive $200 million budgets that no traditional studio would greenlight, not because they weren't good movies, but because those kind of movies weren't going to earn their money back in theaters. Netflix, however, didn't care. They just wanted to be taken seriously. Prestige, awards, cultural relevance, and Martin Scorsese on their resume. But there's a catch. Netflix content isn't designed primarily to be watched. It's designed to be consumed. There's a Netflix look. You've seen it. It's bright, it's flat, and everything is lit so you can see it clearly on a screen this size. While you're sitting on the bus, in the break room on your lunch break, or sitting on the toilet taking a shit. Let's be honest, we all do it. Netflix isn't really in the cinema business. They're in the retention business. They design content knowing that you're probably scrolling through TikTok on your phone while the movie is playing in the background, or partaking in some Netflix and chill. Wink, wink. As a result, content is engineered to survive distraction. Visual storytelling takes a backseat to clarity as subtlety gets sanded down. The algorithm prefers things you can follow without giving them your full attention. And that makes for really bad content for those of us actually paying attention. This concept isn't new, it's also happening to major IPs, which are also being dumbed down for audiences in China who don't speak English as their first language, so that the film is easier to follow. Now imagine that company owning Warner Brothers, a studio built on theatrical spectacle, a studio responsible for Harry Potter, DC, Dune, The Matrix, and plenty of other classic Hollywood films. Suddenly, those movies aren't just films, they're content for a streaming library. Netflix's CEO has been pretty open about this. Movie theaters are competition. From his perspective, why would Netflix embrace a business model that requires people to pay someone else? i.e. movie theaters. As a result, rumors are that Netflix plans to shrink the theatrical window for WB movies to just 17 days. Let that sink in. 17 days. Imagine the Batman Part 2 comes out. If you're busy that month, too bad. It's gone from theaters, beamed straight to your TV. And sure, watching movies at home is convenient and can still be great, especially if you have a solid theater setup. But some movies like Dune, Avatar, and Batman are designed to be experienced in a packed theater with an excited, electric crowd sitting in the dark, staring up at a 60-foot screen. There's something about that shared experience that you just can't replicate at home. Think about Joker. You could feel the tension in the room before he pulls the trigger on Murray. Nobody was eating popcorn, nobody was whispering. The entire theater was holding its breath at the same time. Or in Avengers Endgame when Captain America lifted Thor's hammer. The room didn't just cheer, it shook. Those moments don't just happen on screen, they happen in the room. And when you turn movies into something you can casually get to later, you don't just lose the screen size, you lose the moment. And trust me, I'm not the only one who's concerned. Christopher Nolan, who's now president of the Directors Guild, is leading the charge against this deal. And if you know your history, you know this is personal. For 20 years, Warner Brothers was Nolan's home. Together, they gave us the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Dunkirk. It was a perfect marriage, until the pandemic. In 2020, WB decided to launch Project Popcorn, a plan to release their entire 2021 slate on HBO Max the same day they hit theaters. Nolan, who had just finished Tenet, was furious. He famously said, and I quote, "Some of our industry's biggest filmmakers went to bed thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio, and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service." Ouch. So Nolan packed his bags, took his next film Oppenheimer to Universal, and proved that people will still show up for a 3-hour biopic if you treat it like an event. Now as DGA president, he's watching the studio he used to love getting sold to the very company that invented the business model he hates. And he knows that if Netflix turns Warner Brothers into a content farm, the next Inception won't be a global phenomenon. It'll be a thumbnail you scroll past to get to the office. And speaking of Oppenheimer, if that went to streaming, we wouldn't have had the Barbenheimer doubleheader, a completely organic cultural moment that no algorithm could have ever manufactured. And then there's HBO. If Netflix acquires Warner Brothers, it also acquires HBO, a network that fundamentally changed television. Because HBO wasn't bound by cable standards, like sex and swearing, it meant it could push boundaries. That's how we got The Sopranos, The Wire, and Sex and the City. I love Sex and the City. Shows that redefine what TV could be. And they're basically responsible from TV's glow up from episodic shows on network television to the serialized, big-budget, character-driven shows that launched the golden age of prestige TV. Without HBO, there'd be no Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, or Mad Men. And while Netflix has good shows for every Stranger Things, there's 50 reality dating shows and mediocre crap that you forget about 5 minutes after watching. And finally, there's DC. James Gunn and Peter Safran just rebooted the entire DC universe. And while they have a long-term vision, their contracts only run through spring 2027. That gives them barely a year and a half under this new Netflix regime. And we all know how Netflix operates. They don't care about 10-year plans, they care about quarterly retention. If Superman 2 doesn't immediately drive a massive spike in new signups during its opening weekend, Netflix has a long history of making ruthless, data-driven decisions purely on performance metrics. And when success is measured in short-term subscriber gains instead of long-term audience trust, even major franchises become disposable. If they decide in 2027 that the new DC universe is too expensive or simply not moving the needle enough, or the engagement rates are low, they can pull the plug, write a check, and just pay Gunn and Safran to sit at home and reboot DC yet again. That kind of instability is poison for long-term storytelling, because you can't build a cinematic universe when every chapter is judged like a quarterly earnings report. And you certainly can't ask audiences to invest emotionally when the story might be canceled at any moment. Now, to be fair, there are upsides. Right now, there's just too many streaming services, and folding Max or HBO Max or whatever the hell they're calling it right now into Netflix means one less app you have to pay for. And yeah, having all of Warner Brothers' library, including future projects like the new Harry Potter series in one place, would be super convenient. That is undeniably a better value proposition, but convenience has a cost. Netflix buying Warner Brothers wouldn't just be another acquisition, it would be a philosophical shift from movies as events to movies as assets, from cinema as an experience to a glorified screensaver while you Netflix and chill. When the same company that makes Is It Cake owns one battle after another, the priorities of the art form shift. We move from a world where movies are treated like moments, something you show up for, to a world where they're just files in a library, or something to throw on. Optimized, compressed, and quietly forgotten once the algorithm stops pushing them. Now, look, I hope I'm wrong. I Genuinely do. But then again, Netflix wasn't built to make movies. It was built to replace the video store. And now, from their CEO's mouth to your ears, it's coming for the movie theater. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and behind-the-scenes drama.